Hello and welcome. This is Law Noman and my name is Kristin. Typically, Chanel and I do episodes together, but due to some unforeseen personal issues, Chanel will not be able to join for a while. So for the next few weeks, I am going to be doing a bit of a series. It's going to be focused on the paranormal. So sorry for those of you who listen for the true crime. Also apologies for not having posted, I think the last week or two. I have been sick. I am still a bit sick, so if I sound nasally, I am so sorry. As you've seen from the title of this episode, today I'm talking about shadow people. This is a topic I've wanted to cover for a while. Well, actually, the stories that I'm going to cover over the next few weeks are also some of my favorite topics. So I'm really excited about this little series I'm doing. So let's get into today's episode. Many people have had the experience of seeing something fleeting out of the corner of their eye, or they have seen a shadow that they just couldn't place. You thought you saw a dark shadow, but it just can't be, because there was nothing that could have caused it. Shadow people, as they are called, are entities or spirits that manifest as black masses or shadow-like figures. These manifestations have been reported in many ways: large, small, slow, fast, ball-shaped, flat, etc. One thing that these encounters have in common is that most times the person who sees one of these shadow people is left feeling very fearful of what they have seen. Typically, these shadow figures leave their witnesses with a feeling of dread. So just what are these shadow figures anyway? One theory is that these are ghosts or spirits of people who once lived on Earth but who met a violent or traumatic death. The thought is that they are trapped within that moment and are unable to progress to the afterlife, and so their energy has become darker as they have been stuck here for a longer time. It is also speculated that these shadowy beings are astral projections of people. It is said that some people can astral travel without even knowing it, with this happening mostly in their sleep, while sometimes this sort of thing is done on purpose. So, the theory there is that you're seeing that person on the astral plane and it is showing up to you as a shadow. One of the main understandings of shadow people is that they are demons, or some evil type of being that is there to cause harm. This view is supported by the feeling of dread or doom that some people feel in the presence of these shadows. A small percentage of people view these beings as a sort of guardian who come to warn us or guide us. There's also the pretty cool view that these are time travelers or interdimensional beings that have visited our current reality. There is a direct quote from sstimes.com. This is by Jason Offutt, author of Darkness Walks, The Shadow People Among Us. This author has said, quote, "Many shadow people encounters do seem to mirror ghost encounters and are the most common type of shadow person encounters. A blacker-than-night, human-shaped shadow that people see walking through their bedroom, hallway, living room, etc. These shadow people are mostly benign, usually not taking notice of those who observe them." End quote. Another theory that must be addressed is that some believe that these shadow figures are aliens who are using a cloaking technology to try to conceal themselves. In some accounts of alien abductions, some people say that in the days or weeks prior to them being abducted, they had seen shadow beings around them. Those beings are also said to be the result of overlapping universes. If you've watched the Doctor Who episode, Army of Ghosts from Season 2, the scenario is kind of familiar. In that episode, shadow beings were visiting Earth at regular times each day. Many citizens took to believing these were relatives that had passed, which had come back to visit them. In reality, these were beings from a parallel universe who were actually beginning their invasion of Earth. So it's kind of similar, but not really. So that's a kind of example of the overlapping universe theory, where the two universes sort of bleed into one another. As humans, we are inherently social beings. We long for our tribe or the people that make up our social groups. It is built into us to recognize human faces, and this can often lead to pareidolia, the tendency to pick out meaningful patterns or recognizable images from sets of random data. Although we usually hear about pareidolia in terms of people seeing faces in burnt pieces of toast, it is a necessary brain function. Pareidolia is not just about recognizing faces, it is picking out meaningful shapes from data. So you can see a shadow and your mind sees it as a human form, as a body, when really it's a shadow of something else. So that does play into, are people really seeing shadow beings? Or is it just their mind creating a shape? This then also leads into discussion about dementia and the result of a decrease in brain or cognitive function and how it can lead to illusions or hallucinations. But that's a whole other topic. For me personally, I am a bit skeptical about people's encounters with spirits or shadow beings or anything when they are under the influence of a substance. I feel like that can trigger hallucinations, or it can, cause you to see things in a different way than you normally would. Not saying, obviously, it's not possible that you can encounter a spirit while under the influence of something. I don't know. For me personally, I think it just creates too much doubt in my mind as to whether or not it is believable. But then again, that being said, there is also the aspect of it where maybe being in a sort of altered state due to substances, you are able to see and connect with things. So I don't know, I'm very 50-50 on that. But I specifically excluded stories of people's experiences when it said that they were under the influence of something. That being said, let's get into some experiences people have had with shadow people. All of my sources and all of the stories sources are going to be in the show notes. So if you want to go and read them yourself, you are more than welcome to. So here we go. The following story is by a user named Sniggerty. During the late 1960s, they encountered shadow people on 3 separate occasions. The first time, they caught one looking through their bedroom window before disappearing. The second was a few months later when they woke to 5 shadow people lurking aimlessly around their bedroom. The third and final time was late at a summer camp. They were laying in bed in their bungalow when shadowy figures appeared and began walking in circles around the bed. In all 3 occasions, the figures were pitch black, darker than the dimly lit room. This story is by MacWeirdo42. Their earliest memory involves a shadow person. They were 2 or 3 years old at the time and recall waking to see a dark shadow on the wall beside their crib. A shadow with bright white eyes. It started moving towards them. They moved to the other side of the crib, but another shadow person was approaching from that side as well. Neither creature had any form that could easily be discerned. They were just pitch black against an already shadowed wall. With nowhere to go, they crouched in the center of their crib. The parents recall this user telling them that the shadows were trying to get them. This story is by a user named Voxenow. At 3 a.m. one morning, they woke up and went to the kitchen to get some water. On their way, they stumbled upon a shadow person sitting in the recliner in the family room. They had been seeing shadow people their entire life, so this sudden appearance was not startling. They stood still for a couple of minutes to be certain it was indeed a shadow person. As their eyes adjusted to the dark, it became clearer. A shadow person was sitting in their living room, staring at them. They started moving towards it. The figure seemed undaunted. When they were around 3 feet apart, the shadow person evaporated. The following story is by a user named PineWolf14. They have encountered shadow people more than once. Often, they hear them breathing or feel the shadow hovering over them while they sleep. They've heard whispers saying, "Don't move," in the middle of the night. Wisely, they never did. But on one night this changed. Instead of lying still, they rolled over and came face to face with a shadow person. If the two had been any closer, their foreheads would have been touching. They opened their mouth to scream, but there were hands around their throat, choking them. They started to thrash around, punching and kicking at the shadow person until suddenly the shadow person vanished. This story is by Mistress of the Dark. A few years ago, they were sleeping over at a friend's house and had trouble sleeping. As they were lying awake, a tall, solid, black silhouette entered the bedroom. It wore a top hat and a long coat, and looked like a male figure. After a few seconds, he started talking. Mistress of the Dark doesn't remember the conversation exactly, as this experience took place around 5 years ago, but it was a harmless encounter, and the shadow person seemed genuinely interested in them. Then, a second shadow person appeared, the same black silhouette, but this time it was a woman. Strangely, she was crawling. The man that was sitting in the chair told them not to look, and that the woman wouldn't notice them. She was not a good entity. Shortly after, the woman left, and at dawn, the shadow man too vanished. Those were some stories of people's experiences with shadow people. The most commonly seen shadow person is known as the Hat Man. This being is said to be more ominous than the other shadow people, and he brings so much fear to those who see him. He is said to have a large brimmed hat and a trench coat on. He is known to stand in doorways or at the foot of your bed while you sleep. During my research for this topic, I came across the Hat Man Project, which is a website dedicated to documenting and understanding this phenomenon. This project is the child of Timothy M. Brown Jr., who has dedicated years to this study. He started this in 2001. The following accounts are quoted directly from his website, as I did not want to reword the stories like in the previous ones I just told you, because I can't reword someone else's experience. The link to the website and all these stories is in the show notes. Trenchcoat Man. While living on base in Anchorage, Alaska, I saw a tall man in my bedroom twice. One night, I woke up to who I thought was my husband standing at the foot of our bed. I called out my husband's name and heard him groan next to me. I quickly looked at my husband, then back to the figure, but it had vanished. About a week later, I woke again to see a tall man standing next to the bed on my husband's side. This time, I could see that the man appeared to be wearing a top hat and a trench coat. I saw my husband laying next to me, so I knew it wasn't him. A few seconds passed, and one of my dogs woke and began to growl in the direction of the figure. The figure then swung his coat over himself and disappeared, and I have not seen him since. I later described the incident to my parents, and they told me that as a child I would see a figure walking outside our house that I had named Trenchcoat Man. Through Hat Man's eyes. I live in Australia, and the only time I have seen the Hat Man was when I was a teenager living with my family. I never had any paranormal experiences, night terrors, or sleep paralysis. I don't recall any significant events around this time in my life, except for when my best friend in another state had attempted suicide and subsequently became an amputee due to her injuries. I think this was after seeing the Hat Man, but I'm not sure how long after. I was laying in bed one night, and a dark shadow of a tall man with a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat or cape entered my room. I was facing the door, and my bed was in the middle of the room because my walls were getting painted. The shadow stood in the corner of my doorway for a few seconds. As I'm usually scared of paranormal stuff, I decided to close my eyes and try to sleep. When I closed my eyes, I had an out-of-body experience where I was looking down at myself in the bed from the perspective of a tall person standing in front of my face. I mentioned it to my family soon after, as my mum is superstitious and believes in spirits. She brushed it off, but I didn't expect my older brother to speak up. He told me that when he was younger and staying in that same room, we liked to swap rooms every now and then, he saw the same man of the exact same description. My brother said that he thought it was our uncle who was living with us at the time. When he saw the Hat Man, he pulled his blanket up to cover most of his face and stared up at the figure standing over his bed. We thought this was a unique experience, and we're amazed to see that other people have encountered Hat Man. I even sent my brother a picture of the Hat Man that I saw, and he said it was the exact same figure he saw. It makes me feel nauseous to look at the photo. Neither of us have seen the Hat Man again, and we're still looking for answers. The Hat Man's favorite. As a young child between the 1st and 7th grade, I used to see this shadow man. At first, I would see him passing by lit doorways. Sometimes I would see him at night, or even during the day. One time, I remember I was at my friend's house, and he walked right past the front window of her house, and the crazy thing is she asked me first if I had seen it. And I was so surprised, said, "You saw that too?" Anyway, years go by, and I tell my family, and they think I'm crazy. Fast forward to a very drunken night in junior year of high school. We're telling ghost stories, and my friend brings up how she used to see a man with a top hat and a coat. So we go on Google, and we found a whole forum of people who had also seen him. But what really got me and made me start bawling when I saw the picture of the Hat Man, and he was exactly how I saw him. I screenshot the picture and I sent it to my family, and now they finally believe me. Who was the guest there? My sister and I recently discovered that we saw the same shadow. It was around 4 years ago, and we were sleeping in the same room. The chair, with clothes that everyone has in their bedroom, was between our beds in the middle of the room. I remember clearly waking up in the middle of the night to turn into a comfortable position when I saw a shadow of a man in a trench coat and a fedora sitting on the chair, casting a shadow on the opposite wall. The shadow was there, broken on the wall, like being cast from a physical form, although no one was there. The only light source was the moonlight coming through the window. But still, I could see it, and I remember it pretty clearly. Fast forward a couple of months, I was sitting with my sister, and the chair was in the same position now as it was then. "I'm going to tell you something weird," I said. "But believe me, I saw it." And I told her this, and she confirmed she had seen it too, in the same place, around the same time, and her friend had seen it as well. So again, these were stories from the Hat Man Project. The link to the site is in the show notes. So, now you're aware that there's a shadow person lurking around you. You've seen them a few times, and the sightings are becoming more and more frequent. What do you do? Well, that depends on which of the theories you believe. Say you believe they're aliens or interdimensional beings, well, there's not really much you can do about that, since we don't know pretty much anything about those beings, if they even exist. If it's a ghost or a demon, or some kind of spirits, well, then you could follow typical protocol for expelling those types of entities. You could try cleansing your space and doing some grounding work. In really bad cases, you could enlist the services of a medium or a priest to exorcise the being. In my opinion, when it comes to entities, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel scared, if you feel threatened, you can tell that entity to leave. They might not listen, but putting down those rules and saying, "This is my house, you're not allowed here, you need to leave." If it does feel very threatening and you are very afraid, it's probably best to not engage with the spirit or entity. Get a professional to help you. Typically, like I said, mediums or priests or whatever, those kinds of people have experience and know how to handle it without causing attachments or things like that. So that was our episode on shadow people. This is the first in a series that I'm going to be doing. It's going to be, I think, around 8 episodes. I've got topics for each one. I'm very excited to get started on researching the next one. Thank you so much for listening. We do appreciate your support. You can find all our episodes and information on lawandomen.com. You can listen to our episodes on Spotify, Apple Music, Audible, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're everywhere. You can find us on social media at Law and Omen. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, I think. Yeah, we're just everywhere. Also, the day this comes out, the 25th of September, I think it is at 5 p.m. on the APVA YouTube channel. It is the award ceremony for the APVA Podcast Awards. Remember, we were nominated in the true crime category. So thank you again to everyone who voted. Don't forget to check that out. Thank you again so much for listening. I hope you have an amazing day. Thanks for the support. We love you. Until next week. Bye.